Thank you.
All right, we go now to the former head of policy at the Department of the Treasury, the father of Reaganomics, accomplished economist, and he also, of course, is a syndicated columnist. He's been the editor at the Wall Street Journal, and he writes great articles at his website that we'll be putting on screen. We also carry them in our monthly magazine and at Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. For our regular viewers, he needs no introduction, Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. Well, I could ask a lot of questions, Doc, but I love to throw this at you. Out of the gates, what's on your mind first up? The election, or is it a diversion? What's happening in the economic realm? What's on Dr. Roberts' mind?
Well, you know, what's on my mind right now is that it doesn't really matter from the standpoint of the American people which of these two candidates wins, because they're both for war, they're both for the police state, and all the two parties are fighting over, Alex, is who gets to be the whore for the interest groups. If you get to be, the party that wins the election gets to be the whore for the Israel lobby, for Wall Street, for the military security complex, for agribusiness, for oil, timber, and mining. And that's very lucrative, because when you get through serving those people, they reward you with huge incomes and wealth. And so the two parties are really fighting over who gets to be the prostitute. And the American people are deluded. They think there's some kind of policy difference between the parties. There's not any policy difference. From that standpoint, it doesn't matter who wins, except that the Republicans, I think, are meaner. They have no compassion for ordinary people. They've got theirs, and they're just mean and mean-spirited. And so if the policy won't be any different whether Romney wins or Obama, but the mean-spiritedness of the Republicans will be very pronounced. And, you know, if you look at the two of them, the only other difference is that Romney has already been to Israel, crawling on his belly, groveling. Supposedly we're a superpower, but here is the man who wants to be president, and he's crawling on his belly in the ground, kissing Netanyahu's feet. Well, at least Obama had more dignity than to do that.
He only bows to the Saudi king. Perhaps Romney should publicly kiss Netanyahu's butt, and then he could be elected.
That's the only real difference.
Maybe that's the new swearing in. It's not a Bible, but Netanyahu bends over, and then and I'm sorry, you shouldn't have got me going there.
Well, but really, you see, that's the difference. And yet, all over the internet, you know, for years, we've had all this Karl Rove propaganda. The Republicans send it to each other. It never has any source or site. But Obama is a Marxist. Obama is a Muslim. And the people who send this, they don't have enough sense to understand that if he's a Muslim, why is he killing Muslims in 7 countries? If he's a Marxist, why did Wall Street and the Israel lobby put him in the White House? It's just all so absurd. The American people haven't a clue about anything that affects them. And as I say, the policy won't be any different whether Obama's in there or Romney, any more than it made any difference between Bush and Obama.
All right, but who do you think they're getting ready to put in, though?
I don't think they care, because whoever they put in, they control. They own them both.
So it's like Don King owning both boxers or all the horses. Okay, so let me shift gears then. What's happening in the economy since we talked a couple months ago? I mean, it looks like things are deteriorating even faster.
That's right. There's no recovery. The jobs growth continues to lag the population growth. The numbers they're not exactly rigged, but what happens is the Bureau of Labor Statistics uses all of these models that don't really work except in normal times. So when they make these projections, and they're all loaded for times that are normal when the economy is growing and jobs are growing. And so there's no recovery. There's not going to be one. I suspect that during these next 4 years, we're going to see real problems with the dollar. We're going to see probably finally the inflation break loose. And they don't have any policies to deal with that. So the chances are whoever wins this election, that party is likely to be destroyed by the economic crisis that's sitting there waiting on the victor.
Getting back to the election, they've been trying to hype civil unrest if the election's contested. Why do you think some of the establishment quarters have been pushing that?
Well, I think that the Republicans intend to steal the election because they own the voting machines and they own the proprietary software. And I think that they intend to steal them, and it really depends on how close the election is. It's easy to steal a close election. It's hard to steal one that's not close because the exit polls, to the extent they still have them, are a check on the vote count. You know, like if you have a vote count that varies considerably from the exit poll, it raises eyebrows. This is what happened in the 2004 election, where the exit polls show that Kerry had won, but the vote count. And this is a very unusual thing. So I think that they intend to steal it, but it may not be as close as they are counting on, in which case the machines won't be programmed to steal enough votes to throw the election to the Republicans. But I think that's what Karl Rove and the Republican machine intends, that they, but it doesn't really matter because the policies are not going to be any different. As I said, all the two parties are fighting for is who gets to be the whore, the prostitute, for the interest groups.
But what about my Obama phone?
Look, I think that whoever wins, it's a disaster for the country. And probably everybody should have voted for Ronald Reagan. He is a dead man. He'd be a better president than the two choices. Now, of course, you always have these third-party candidates, and any of them would be far better. But the Americans are not yet ready to vote third party. So that's just my view. It's not anything that we can hope for the future because both parties have the same policies because they represent the same interest groups. You know, in the old system, when the unions were still strong, the Democrats had independent source of financing. And so there was some difference in the policies between the parties. But with the offshoring of all the manufacturing jobs, the decline in union members and power and money, the Democrats now dependent on the same campaign contributions.
Sure. So it's really two different management teams.
It's just two management teams fighting over who gets to be the whore. That's all it's about. It's not about policy or.
So it's like two hookers in a parking lot fighting over a John.
That's exactly what it is. And the American people are just so out of it they haven't a clue.
How does the music stop in all this, though? Because government's getting more insane, the police are getting more insane, the public's getting more insane, government's getting more insane. I mean, where does it end? Because, you know, we've talked a lot about this, how they used al-Qaeda against Libya, now Syria. And Hillary was in the news today saying, we've got to go into Syria because al-Qaeda is there. So, I mean, you know, it's now... And I talk to people about this on the street, and they go, well, yeah, we got to get al-Qaeda. I'm like, the government put al-Qaeda in there. And they just go, but it's al-Qaeda. So, I mean, I guess it is, America was, I guess by her prosperity, was turned into the giant jellyfish.
Well, that's right. I think where it ends is when the dollar goes, because when the dollar goes, the power goes. We can't you see, the only way we function now is because the dollar is the world reserve currency. We can pay our bills by printing money. No other country can do that. But when the dollar goes, you can't pay your bills, and it's all over. And because the country is bankrupt, and it survives because it can create money, it can print money. And the world will not accept it once it loses the reserve currency role. So I think that's when it ends, or else it will end in nuclear war, because we've been so aggressive toward Russia and China. And if you pay any attention to the news that comes out of Russia, you see they are upgrading all of their intercontinental ballistic nuclear missiles. They're putting them to sea, upgrading their submarines, their seaborne platforms. We're forcing two other powers to become to respond to our aggressiveness toward them.
But wait a minute. When Fukushima blew up and higher radiation clouds came over, they just had the EPA raise the level of what they said was safe. Couldn't they just put out a government policy report if all our cities got nuked, that nuclear weapons no longer destroy cities if they airburst at 2,000 feet?
Yeah, they'll probably do something like that. But nevertheless, when one of those things goes off, the city will be destroyed.
but not if government says. I'll never forget Perino or whatever her name was under Bush when they were devaluing the dollar in 2008. And they kept saying in the press conference, has the dollar been devalued? And of course, the news could, anytime they want to go, point out that that it was being devalued. And she said, I'm not going to comment on that. I'm not going to say. And they said, well, we don't know if it is because they didn't say. So my question is, if a nuke went off in D.C., if the media said it didn't go off, did it go off?
Well, D.C. wouldn't be there.
I don't know. Karl Rove says they control reality.
Yeah, well, if a nuke goes off in Washington, we'll be rid of the worst people in the country.
Well, there's a conspiracy theory. He claims a nuke would destroy a city. That's his opinion. We all know where government comes from. It comes from our heavenly creator, and the oxygen we breathe comes out of the tailpipe of politicians.
Well, actually, all of this aggressiveness is the neoconservative ideology. The project for the new American century, that we are the indispensable people. We have the right to rule the others and to bend them to our will. And this is a very powerful and strong ideology. It's completely represented in both parties, particularly in the Republican Party now. And it leads to war. It presses other countries to respond to the military aggression. You can't go build all kinds of missile bases around Russia and not expect a reaction. And you can't establish all kinds of new naval and air and land bases threatening China and without expecting a reaction. And so what is the policy, though? Because the globalists that run this country, the corporations, this gaggle of special interest, they're busy offsourcing everything to China while trying to gear up for war with China. I mean, I guess they're just using them as a market factor to destroy their economic enemies here while also wanting to destroy them. I mean, I guess the New World Order model, the globalist model, is overturn every foundation, every building, every stone. They attack the family. They attack the Amish. They attack people selling lemonade. I mean, I guess it is just basically a crazed gorilla on PCP running around beating everybody's brains out. Well, there are different factions. You see, the corporations are not the New World Order. They're just increasing their profits and managerial bonuses and shareholder returns.
So the New World Order is kind of like a conductor with a bunch of pirates out of control swarming under its wings.
Well, it may be trying to conduct them, but they're independent action. And the corporations and Wall Street are getting rich out of substituting cheap labor for expensive labor. And the wars are rewarding to the military security complex because they make billions and billions in profits. And the war on terror is rewarding to the police state aspects. We now have this Department of Homeland Security, which is creating its own army. And we have, the CIA loves this because its power goes way up.
So it is a lawlessness, a will to power that Nietzsche talked about by all the special interest, where they're in control of everything but themselves, running around in 800 different directions, just robbing and looting and stealing everything.
That's about it. Yeah, you can see the lawlessness. I mean, look what Bush and Cheney did to law. I mean, they destroyed the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, all of our legal protections. They violated U.S. statutory laws.
Well, wait a minute, sir. FEMA says the founders were bad, so isn't it good to get rid of due process?
Oh, don't start being silly now.
Hey, I know I'm being silly, but that's actually what they're saying. So,
I think on the whole that the country has become lawless because that's what the government did. And when you have lawlessness, you end up with the power in the executive, and that's what the Republican society that wanted the unitary executive, the power in the executive. And so that's what we're getting. And the president is being transformed into a Caesar. And he's not accountable. Look what Bush did. He violated U.S. law against torture. He violated the FISA Act against spying on Americans without warrants. He violated the due process requirement of the Constitution, habeas corpus, and he was not held accountable for any of this. And he went to war based on fabrications and lies. He knew he was lying, and this is a crime. And they've committed war crimes, and these are crimes under the Geneva Conventions, to which we are the main creator of. And there was no accountability. And so Obama comes in, and what did he do? He didn't hold them accountable either. He said, "Oh, I like all these powers. we'll make them legal."
And Republicans identify with the Republicans and get a power trip. The Democrats identify with the Democrats, get a power trip. In summation, Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, how does it end then? I mean, I guess nuclear war or the glorious rule of the neocons?
Well, I don't think the United States will be able to prevail over Russia and China. If you look at, we were 11 years in Afghanistan and apparently have been defeated. We were, 8 years in Iraq and achieved nothing. So if we can't occupy Baghdad, and we can't defeat a few thousand Taliban armed with AK-47s, we're not going to be able to defeat Russia and China. They hold more cards. And so if we keep pressing, we're going to come up against these two powers. And they're certainly going to resist. And it's not going to go well for the United States or the world. And we also have the problem of the dollar. The Treasury continues to pour out over $1 trillion in bonds every year, and the Federal Reserve continues to print the money to buy the bonds. And so the dollar cannot survive as the world reserve currency under that type of a regime.
And that was my next and final question. Max Keiser says he thinks the dollar is going to start dying by April. Lindsey Williams says this year. I remember you on the show like 5 years ago saying it'll take a lot longer than people say. The late, great Bob Chapman said the same thing, a lot of others. But here we are 5 years later, and you said, more like 5, 6 years. I mean, now we are getting closer to that point, even if it's 2, 3 years away. I mean, how long can this go? As they implode the economy, people keep racing into the dollar. It's still sinking, but not as fast as all the other currencies. I know that's an oversimplification, but I mean, is the comeuppance coming, and what are different ways it could fall apart?
Well, it's hard to know, but I think it can't go on forever. I'd give it another 2 years, 3 at the most. And I think that you see right now, because of the euro crisis, which I think is largely hype, and we're behind it because it protects the dollar. But you see, the Chinese economy now is essentially the equal of our own, and in many ways superior. For example, we've got like 12 million people working in manufacturing, and China has 120 million. In other words, the manufacturing workforce of China is equal to the entire workforce of the United States.
Manufacturing is power.
What? So, and if you look at Russia, it's got all the energy it needs. It exports energy. And it really holds the cards over Europe. If it wanted to get tough and just say, okay, if you continue with NATO, you continue supporting the Americans.
Turn the gas off.
We're going to turn it off. And so I think the aggressiveness of the Americans does not serve our interests, because it makes these other countries realize that they're threatened. And when they realize that, they take offsetting action. So I think that, as I said, I think the next 4 years is going to be extremely hard on whoever's in office. I wouldn't want to be there. and even if you had a really good man, a really good or woman, a really good president in there, it's going to be extremely hard. Now, for the two that we're choosing between, neither of them is up to this type of challenge. And I think that Romney is up to even less, because he's so cocksure and so aggressive. And I think that he'll have even a harder time than Obama would. But whoever's going to be in office for the next 4 years is going to be a failure. The problems are just going to overwhelm them. The economy's not recovering. It's on the verge of falling off again. So then what happens to the deficit? It gets bigger. They have to create more debt. They have to print more money.
Sure.
It's just not.
All right, well, let's talk about solutions, Dr. Roberts. You charted the Reagan course, which undoubtedly was successful if people really study it, despite the Democrats demonizing it. You're a realist here, and I'm going to give you the floor in 5 closing minutes, and we're going to let you get to bed. I know it's late, or get back to watching the news or our coverage or whatever you're doing. What would you do if you were president and you could somehow convince the House and the Senate to go along with you? What would you do if you were, say, elected president for 4 years?
Well, I'd stop the wars, because that would save hundreds of billions of dollars instantly. And I would get through. I would tax corporations according to where they added value to their product. If they add value in China, they'd have a very high tax rate. If they add value in the United States, they'd have a low tax rate. That would bring them back here, and we'd be able to get the jobs back and the careers back, and we could recreate a middle class and recreate the ladders of upward mobility that gave us social stability. And that's what I would do, and nothing else would work. And actually, with all the powers the president has now, I wouldn't need the House and Senate. I could just say, this is part of the war on terror, and I don't have to give any accountability to the House and the Senate or to the courts. And if you give me too much trouble, I'll have to decide you're a terrorist and arrest you. But any president can do that now. I mean, because of the way Bush and Cheney and Obama have developed this, the president really can do whatever he wants. He doesn't have to obey the law. He doesn't have to pay attention to separation of powers. He declares a war when he wants to. It's like it's already evolving into a dictatorship.
And expanding on that, Ron Paul said, look, if I got elected president, I'm not going to use these unconstitutional powers, so don't expect me to be able to fix things. And that's the old thing of Gandalf when they offer him the ring of power. He says, don't offer me that, it would be turned to bad. I mean, obviously, if you were president, you wouldn't use the dictatorial powers. The problem is the bureaucracy itself behaves in a dictatorial way right now. I mean, we see this with sheriff's deputies and bureaucrats and code enforcers, and, you know, we see census takers busting down doors and raping women. I mean, that's what's so scary about a tyranny, is it empowers all these other little scumlings to do whatever they want. And here's what's different between America and Germany or Russia or Cambodia or any of these tyrannies. There are 170 million gun owners, roughly. There are 400 million guns of, you know, newer manufactured in the last 50 years. If just 1% of those people stand up, you're talking about 1,700,000 people. And I'm here to tell you, a lot of people are not looking for trouble, but if stuff really unravels, they're not going to FEMA camps, they're not going to work centers, they're just going to die at their house, so they're going to go out and find some trouble. I don't think the bureaucrats understand their real threat's not going to be Russia and China. If they really push this over the edge with all these desperate people, I think they're taking the restraint of constitutionalists and veterans and people as weakness, when I think it's really the opposite. The average person out there who is really informed understands the average cop or military security person is just a minion and isn't their enemy. But it doesn't matter. If that minion of the system marches out against you, well, then it's a whole nother ball of wax. And I'm looking at civil war in this country, Dr. Roberts, if this continues.
Well, I don't know about that, Alex. I think the people are a long ways from that. They'll have to be hungry first and oppressed in ways that they realize. And I think where the trouble will come will be they're going to run into trouble with Iran, with Russia, with China, and with the dollar. And I think that's going to overwhelm their power and their confidence. And I think that's how this comes to an end. I don't think it will be from gun owners or civil war, but I don't really know. I mean, you may be right.
All right. Well, Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, thank you so much for the time tonight. We'll have to continue to check in with you. The website is paulcraigroberts.org. Excellent site, excellent articles. And again, you have the Joseph Stalin quote up there today. He who casts the vote decides nothing. He who counts the vote decides everything. So I guess there is a democracy within the republic in that the different crime syndicates are trying to steal as many votes as they can. So there is a type of criminal fraud free market there.
Right. That's it.
Thank you, Doctor.
Glad to be with you, Alex.
Great. Thank you, sir. Have a good night as well.